Dala Dongwa Zibeda, Nuba Zibega, Tarbatan, Tamjen, Jimbar, Pada, Juba, Sibatan, Tijazor, Sibe, Moanam Kotan, Yambe, Simjen, Tamje, Deva, Danjen, Donga, Danda, Nudalana, Mepa, Yandaba, Zobe, Sanjo, Rambo, Jetopa,
All matter sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly will I establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. The ground is sprinkled with scented water and strewn with flowers. It is adorned with Meru, the supreme mountain, the four continents, and the sun and the moon. As a Buddha field, I offer it. May all sentient beings attain the happiness of the Buddha fields. Please turn the wheel of the Dharma of the two vehicles and their combination according to the dispositions and likewise the mental capacities of sentient beings.
Ashidele Lama.
Bardo
I've cut off. Can somebody hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Lama.
We lost Lama, huh?
We cannot hear Lama.
You also cannot. Oh, ta yang kia song ronang ta na ti kailan so kaba ti che song. Tanda kailan ki kole me ba cha song yang kia song ronang.
Ta tereng sepa padore. Te ko song.
Ti ko song.
A kazang chuni ke pado kola te sa mre ja ran cha ran ba yin de kan de yung go. Then ta te so go to
What's going on? Keeps cutting.
Yeah.
You hear it? Do you hear Lama? Anybody?
Oh, hi. Ina, I think the center, this is Carolyn. I think the center reception is not, the Wi-Fi is not very stable. So Teddy is trying to contact with the center people to see if we can improve the Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know if, I don't think Lama say anything, huh? We cannot do any translation for now.
No, because I don't hear anything.
Okay. Okay, we just wait for Lama's come back.
Okay.
Everybody, so since we are waiting for Lama's come back, just a very quick announcement. This coming Wednesday night, we will have Vajrasattva teaching for preparing the weekend retreat. So the teaching will be only one day, one night. I mean, just for Wednesday night from 7:30 to maybe around 9. So if you can join with us, we're sending out the link, WeChat link, and Zoom link very soon. And the coming weekend, we will have a Vajrasattva retreat, Saturday and Sunday. So just book the time with us and we can practice together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phoenix.
Hello.
Oh, hello. Tayang, kailan so che song tapa? Sama me ba cha song?
Ta tereng ado parso token na ge yima tere ba. Then the kachan ta chuni pado koni. Konta te sa lap tawari. Ta tere ge kazu draw matawa chene teni ramba ge da mata. Ko lan chamro yo so ka sala le ko yorwa. Ma che wa len ro yo so ka sala le ko yore. So la ta sepa pardos che ta ngaran so xe tsawe ji se pardo la xa yip chi xe gon rao la go yo re te ta chi tang rao re ma to ta chi te ngi pa yo ma re te yena ta xa yip chi xe go ke che seka tawe te chuni ka pardo ko tang teni seka tawe te ta sepa pardo te la jan sepa pardo lan sam chan te sa ko tu su yon renga yo re ten rao re yena ta chi to ngi pa yo sa ma re ten re se na Chitang around so Yapigo, Labita and our ticker. Part Chisul and younger Yores.
So today we come to the last of the 6 Bardos, and the last is the Bardo of Becoming. And so last week we spoke about the Bardo of Dharmatam and explained the various things that arise at that time. And so then if one has not become liberated during the Bardo of Dharmatam, then one continues on into the Bardo of Becoming, which is where one then comes to the place of one's future rebirth. So where one will continue to wander in samsara. So the journey to that place is called the Bardo of Becoming. And so in general, it is said that after one has died, one spends 49 days in the Bardo altogether. But actually, this is really just a general, like an estimation, but actually it is not exactly that time necessarily. But if it is 49 days, then approximately half of that one spends in the Bardo of Dharmata and the other half in the Bardo of Becoming. But sometimes the Bardo of Becoming is a little bit longer. So it's not always exactly 49 days. It's just what it is said in general, because for the most part, this is the approximately, this is the amount of time that we spend in the Bardo.
Ini siapa Bardo gan lep sadu ta tarpa toya le tesa kale karu chin chawari tendu xienan dan jikta wo ta te la soba ke kanga la ya tendu che maur chin chawa ke rawang chuni me pa ta kasa kala che sabro long che wana yesen che kasa kala che ro si pan cham si ba sipa Bardo sena ta tendu che rin do wa ta tela namju nga zo he du ti dorje den la rogo mari manga la ya hyogo mari te ni ma to kare na si pan ro si pa re sen tendu sen song yo re ta dorje den ta manga se ju te ngune sen ton da te rin do ta ta chitang thi mangbo kan na tendu rang song yo re ta ngaran la samnyo ta dorje den la kare sen mon ro le na ta manga la ya ma yo ya te en ju chi dorje den la kare na yong si pa kawai na ro si pa dorje den la kare sen ro ma si pa tendu yin na ngaran samnyo me ma te ngune sen na dorje den ta ta jaga dorje den te rang re mo do ta ta ji me len ba ka song ya pa ka pa du mo la gong je jan so na ta na te song yo re nam dor sa ta je ne je thok pa sa ro long che ta song yo re ta nam dor sa se na ta pa san je ga sa ta la la ta dorje din sen de te te re cha san je tham je sang je bu ke ne jo dorje ta le pe ya ne nam dor sa ta ng se san je tham je san je ko kon pan ta la sa do je ne je se na ta ma ro re to ko na je wa yang lang yo ma re wa ngal la ye hyo yo ma re nam dor sa ro ma to ta chu cha wa re ta ko ni te pa do ren ba kha che song yo re te son to to yo ma re wa ta ma sa pa pa do la yo re nam dor sa ro ma to ta chu re de ni ma je wa yang lang yo ma re ro re to le je wa yang lang yo ma re ta do je wa lang na te ni se pa pa do do de zo cha re wa te la gun do nam dor sa ta je ne ni lan do ko ma re ta ta te ma to ka wa yin na ro si pa ten de ji te don da de ten de sen na re so na ta ta ti pa de mo la gong je jam so na na sa po song yo re ten de lan kim po ma se gan de wa yang pe te le ya po ten de song yo re ma to pa de mo la re ta ta pa de ti yin ba tam ke la do de den lan ro ma re ja do de den lan ro ma re ya ma nga na ya hyu ma re te ni ma to yong si re so na ka ro ten de rang song ya pan da yo re
So once we have arrived in the Bardo of Becoming, then at this point already it is a little bit difficult to become liberated, because at that part one is completely overcome with fear and with panic, and one experiences much more hardship than before. So at that time one really doesn't have any freedom at all, and the consciousness can just go all over the place. It is that just like a bird's feather being blown away by the wind. It is possible for the consciousness really to go anywhere. And this is why it is referred to as the Bardo of Becoming. Becoming also literally actually means in Tibetan like possibility, the Bardo of possibilities. So it's possible to go really anywhere at all. But so there are the general standard Bardo instructions normally say that in the Bardo of Becoming, one, aside aside from going to the seat of both Gaia and down to the lowest hell, anything in between is possible at this point. And so this is what it mentions actually in many instructions. And so actually I was thinking about it quite a bit, and I was wondering that if anything is possible, if up or down, anything is possible in that Bardo of Becoming, then why wouldn't it be possible to go to Bodh Gaya, for example, right? Because it says aside from Bodh Gaya and the lowest hell, one can go anywhere in between. So, and then having thought about that, I found that actually it is not speaking about the Bodh Gaya that we know in India, not this Bodh Gaya, but its meaning was actually explained by Jigme Lingpa in the Bardo prayer called the Ocean of a Single Intent. And in that prayer, it says that, so during the Bardo, it says that one goes like a feather blown by the wind in between complete liberation and the place of future birth. And so this line really clarified the meaning, because in between complete liberation means that, first of all, one has not attained enlightenment in the previous Bardo. So that's why one is in the Bardo of Becoming, because one has not reached enlightenment. So the state of complete liberation refers to, that is that Bodh Gaya, and that refers to the state of complete Buddhahood. And so in between complete liberation and future birth. So the future birth is the other extreme, the other side of the spectrum. And in between those two, anything is possible in the Bardo of Becoming. So that is the point where one has not yet entered the womb, but also one has not attained liberation in the previous Bardo. So that is really what's meant with in between the Bodh Gaya and the lowest hell. So one has not yet taken birth, but also one has not attained liberation. That's what it really means. And so at this point, then the previous Bardo is complete. And the moment one has taken birth, one comes to one's birthplace in the Bardo of Becoming, that is the end of the Bardo of Becoming. Then one has already taken birth. But until that happens, it's possible for the consciousness to go really anywhere in the Bardo. So this is how it is said in the Bardo aspiration prayer, the Ocean of a Single Intent. And Khenpo Munsel gave excellent commentary on that clarified the meaning of that, the Bardo prayer. But in many of the other teachings, the scriptures on the Bardo, actually it doesn't say it so clearly. It just basically speaks about in between Bodh Gaya and the womb, basically. Anything is possible.
다 세파 바도가 값수 당국의 제 된타제니 로제라 다다 제왕 흠마가 거가 박자대 효치 대 나완도 가되나 대 나완도 효치와 다 대들로다 요 말에 대대 매년도 봉보시 초반도 힌두지 남시세 대그 다 박자를 들어가 예지로 제 여러와 되니 대연송 자도 다 골롱비와 나지 몰라면서 나지 띵띵치는 봐 제 삼상의 발도 나게 다제 발도 그래 심지 인바단 제가 요리 되이나 몰라는 만체 소나인다 띵띵에 빠진 제 빠진了양 업데칼지 몰라는 사보양 배반도 전주스는 제 네 양사자 띠라 요파 가도라 랍상 사자 인바지로 랩송한다고 다 던데서는 미빠매 봐
And so in the first in the Bardo of Becoming, in the beginning of the Bardo of Becoming, maybe for about 1 week or 2 weeks or so, the imprints of the previous life are stronger. So the appearances of and perceptions that one was accustomed to in a previous life, they mainly manifest. It's just at that time one doesn't have a body. So here we speak about the name and 4 aggregates. So we have the consciousness and perception, karmic formation and feelings, but a mental body that arises due to habitual tendencies. And so just like being blown around by the wind, just like being in a dream, anything can arise. One can dream of anything. It is not certain at all. And so sometimes one may also meet with other Bardo sentient beings, but this encounter is perceived just like in a dream, like we're right now, like you're meeting someone in a dream. And it's also very uncertain. It's random and also changes instantly, momentarily, and is not very clear, with vague, just like a dream. And in the next moment, you're already at some other location and so on. So this timing is uncertain.
네, 바도게 심진데라 다 고랑 다다 아란소나 인그 제 zupo mena yang drugo toya yoya tan je zupo danya yoba ta ko sorwa donga de so tata maran so zupo yoba ka to le yoba na yin de le jan tarong shuk che zam den de sen ta kwa yong de ge yo re yan nang dan ji ta de de ne to so ta pa do gang ge kap se na ngaran so tata che chue nyam len da wo de se nyong wa la pa de je give sem ta la ya control de pa ta na che te sar ge yin la pinsen la so ba den de ge lo je yo na na ka de te sar ge ti so wa ti ro sa na ti ka so ba de do ma te se ne chong ro go yo pa ta yang ta pa to bo ko ka chen bo yo de ba de na ka de na den de se na yong ge do wa teni te sar ge ya do ma me sa na cham jo ya 참조할 수 있도록 하다. 다 개발론도 가지 지나야. 바로 값을 때다고 지나야. 때 값을 헛때 갈로 빈도 전부 형대와. 전도제 인도 때는데 다 나는 남주에는 다 때다고 검신자 토야 세고야 때 아주 chuy냠네 세나 다 됐다 소리와. 또 쪽배 가진보 다 간내나 너서 봐도 강근내 값내나 다 빈도 자 전부 요대와 전도제 인도와.
So then this Bardo sentient being has feelings just like us, but even though it doesn't have a body in the Bardo, it still experiences hunger and cold and the feeling of suffering, just like when it had a body before, just actually much stronger than before. And there is constant fear and panic. So if we have engaged in some practice, Dhamma practice in our life, and have cultivated a virtuous mind, and have cultivated faith in the 3 jewels, and have cultivated some wish to benefit others, then also at that time in the Bardo, through habituation, this kind of state of mind, this kind of feeling will again arise. All of a sudden, this virtuous mind, this altruistic mind arises. And so then again, there is a great opportunity for liberation. So therefore, when we are alive, if we were able to cultivate these thoughts and then make an end to non-virtuous thoughts and give rise to a virtuous state of mind, then this will be extremely beneficial in the Bardo. And that is why it is really so important that we habituate, we train the mind on an ongoing basis. And this is really why we engage in Dharma practice. So such training of the mind is really of incredible benefit at any time in this life, in the Bardo, or in future lives.
Pena Bardo gene kala tan samtona jikpo dra tang tani yansa la so ba te cho pe hianan chao den de to tani kala kapo den de yong de do de tan de ngone se ne rang ke sem gun nam nyu mo ba to cha chi dang tmo de so ga na wa rin do pe de ta o tani pe rang la dong a ka nga zo yong ba kap su ta pe na ke dang ta o ga na de rang la cha yong ba kap sha de yo ro den de ga kap su te yin la che pin sam de go su lo che to se na ta xie dang ge do so de pin sam ro de ne de xie dang ge rang so de lam sang ko xian ro yan ro de yin ji ta ta tan ro yan ro ta pe ya na de na yin se na don na ta na wa cha ma rang ge che nyu mo ba ge na wa de pa se le shan na de se no yu de nyu mo ba de ka ma shu chong na de projection ro de me ba cha no do.
And so then in the Bardo, sometimes the Bardo sentient being perceives really dreadful sounds, or sometimes, for example, we come to a high cliff that is really very frightening. And so we encounter all kinds of really difficult situations in the Bardo. And actually what they all are, they are nothing but the projections, the appearances of one's own mind, the afflictive emotions of attachment, anger, ignorance. So for example, now when in our life, when we experience a problem, some suffering, for example, we get angry, then first anger arises in our mind. But then if we can train the mind that once the anger has arisen, to instead train a mind in giving rise to an altruistic mind that wishes to benefit others, then the anger will dissolve, because the altruistic mind is the direct opposite of the mind of anger. So when it arises, then instantly the anger has dissolved, has melted away. And then when one trains in that, and also in the Bardo, that will help one to become freed from these frightening perceptions. So the various appearances that arise really are the projections, the manifestations of one's afflictive emotions. And they will disappear if one has trained the mind in cultivating, for example, an altruistic mind.
Nge la ju te ta pa du ne ka la ji ta sham ba ka su te ka su je pin sam go lon da wa ta je to na lam sang ko rang ti te le do so to mo ke ra zo te xie to ko do wa pa do ko rang ka sa an sam sam ti pin sam je ya ta yang kon cho son la te pa yo ya te ke ge lo je ya yo re wa te ka chen bo te je wo ka ti ka ko do ma te me do wa.
So when we are in the Bardo, and inside the Bardo, if you're able to give rise to an altruistic mind, so for example, when you encounter some kind of enemy and so on, and then you cultivate an altruistic mind, then instantly an opposite arises, and then this manifestation of ignorance will dissolve, and altruism has arisen. So therefore, it's important that at that time we can cultivate an altruistic mind and also faith in the three jewels, because at this time in the Bardo, then when these virtuous thoughts arise, then these suffering appearances will disappear.
Tani Bardo ne ka te la tu go to li na wa sha ga yo re. Tani ti ka se ko khalang da wa je lo thon na ko ka ya pin tho yo ma re. Ko zo me pa ke Bardo ke sen jin la zo yo pa khala ka ya sa ya yo ma re. Pin tho yo ma re. Te ka re ke pin ga yo se na nga ran so ko pin sem go ni mo wa se pa te le te ne ta te ko te sa ko cho wa la te sa ke tu go ma to wa no khala su na wa no. Sharto ko yo nga ran so nam ju sur to ya ta ne je te cho te 다 Bardo sentiente 조금 칼라 때래 문에 다나 그 지금 그 칼라 그 가요 핀토 요 말에 가르스 지금 그 칼란도 이나 아주 무아세바 무아세고 요래 몰람 세바 될 때는 이 코란 수대서라 톱으로 도와마도 칼라질 제바 점제 가요 빈거요 말에 Bardo sentiente
And so in a Bardo sentient being experiences this perception of hunger, for example. But even though they feel hungry, they don't have a physical body. So even if they would actually encounter food, it wouldn't help them, wouldn't benefit them at all because they don't have a body to eat that food. So food won't help them actually, even though they're hungry. So what helps them is the wish to benefit them, an altruistic mind, our dedications. If we dedicate to them with an altruistic mind, then they will have this experience, this feeling of not being so hungry. And it seems to them as though they are actually ate something. So that's the purpose of us doing the sur or the smoke offering that we perform on behalf of the deceased and the various practices, and we offer them of food and so forth. But actually, it's not the material food that will benefit them. So even if we're actually offering food, we have to dedicate toward them. And it's that dedication that comes from an altruistic mind that they will receive. But just encountering food itself, that is something that will not benefit a sentient being in a Bardo.
Tene Bardo kapsu rikpa jangbo chanro go yore. Tata rikpa me wangbo jong yo ba ji yena yang Bardo kapsu ta ko pe rikpa jangbo cha de yore. Karere sina ta ko hata go zupo de la tu go yo marwa. Ten pe jangbo cha de yore. Koran so la ngu hi chong chong yang yore. Mai sem go kar hi ndo. Ta ti ngu hi de ngune nyam le se yo ne ke 사미긴 침바 던데다 말이지 코다 zubo me bala tin hata zubo me bala tin tesar ke monsi chunghi chungchong yore mai sem ko kar sangun do te ta shi to ya tela tin ta mo ji hyoso na ngaran su ta na cha na da ko bi nyam de na da tu chu ke pe kol che sem da tende se go ya de pinsa se go ya da jang ga chen bo tende zen cha go do yin sem de se hin do do ko Then da Jason Pisa una teni Koranchi Senquando Gami. Teni Telatine desarga yang ya Donga Jungsuka Sala, Samjor Sitana. Tender Pinto Yore. There Maimba Je Kokola Je Kudondo Mebatan, young Collection Mebatan. Then Mate Nekonda Lapari. Koran ke chi juse panjo la de wa tu chu ko la chi ha thom da sen tene de la tin da ko he dan la mus ha thop se wa ta ma yin yang sem na ni sam no min ban chang na ku shin do wa de la tin ne ya ma che ka nga che sa lan sam jo se do ke nin ka ten de yong mu yo de so pe za gu ju ka chen bo ren do wa.
And in the Bardo, the consciousness, the mind is extremely bright, so very clear, very bright. And actually, even if in one's lifetime now one has some like a mental impairment, in the Bardo that is removed, and in the Bardo the mind is very bright and very clear. And that is because in a Bardo, one doesn't need to rely on a physical body of flesh, blood, and bones. And so for this reason, because one doesn't have this limiting physical body, in the Bardo, the consciousness is extremely bright. And it even has a little clairvoyant ability. For example, such as knowing what other people think. But that it's not that kind of clairvoyance, which is like an uncontaminated and untarnished knowledge that comes from practice. It's just a slight clairvoyant ability that comes from not having a physical body of flesh, blood, and bones. And so this slight clairvoyant ability, for example, allows the consciousness to know what other people are thinking. And so for this reason, it is extremely important that the family members and the relatives and friends and so on, that they really have a beneficial mind for that deceased person within them, that they have a love for that being within them, a wish to benefit that being. Because then the clinging mind, the negative mind of that Bardo sentient being may become pacified. And due to this mind of love that it receives, the mind will feel fulfilled. So then, as a result of the mind feeling fulfilled with our love, then it is possible that when one meets these crossroads of taking birth, one will come to a place of less suffering. Otherwise, if, for example, the family members do not really care about that person, or if they don't really love that person, and moreover, as I also mentioned before the other day, is that even, like, for example, the person has died and the family members are fighting over that person's money and wealth and so on. And then the person, the consciousness that has died, when they know that with their clairvoyant mind, it will make them angry. And even if the people do not actually fight over the things, even if they have negative thoughts about those things, the consciousness is clairvoyant at that time and knows what we are thinking. And so that becomes really a danger for that consciousness to, because it is at a crossroads, to go into a negative direction. So it's extremely important that at this point that one is extremely careful about one's thoughts and feelings about that deceased person.
Any partisan change the request I will use on a telatine, Naranzo get Yamling cola, Sandem Rose the Yata, Sugar cola, Cheta, get a cola, Tata Naranzo the Sancho Siduyan, the Sur de Yatan, Sur there's a tap Jisu cola, Chuhies in it. Then they say, Yorova. To talk about Jim Cherry, partisan change the antics and a level was in the Sugar to that Hako Tabat and the Aquardo Nema Corante Circle, Lobion, Yamlin Singing, less more prolatina, allows in the so situya. Tender Yongodoa, Telatin, Korangachet, Molam Jayata, Lanche Chuka, Lamdrega Cortan Cheta, Gedek Cola Sopala Tendesena, Sandab Seata. Tocholatine, Pinto Chembo Yon Toboyore, Corampe Gavasola and Sam Josen. Tender let house in Lona Joya Yongodoa. Te pen at Kozuboyo Mario Telatine Rito. Tatangaranso Pendel Yagore. Shingdong Chembo, Saigana Yon, Magic Trigon, Tritogomarango, Joja Togomara. Ti Shingdong te Chuana Yon, then Magic Kawati. Yason Gujo, let house in Jatu, Petina, yes, and Takora Zubo, Shatal to Magodu, and there's an Samjol, let house in Siat and the young.
And so the Bardo consciousness is extremely clear. Awareness is very bright. And so therefore, due to that, if we engage in practice and we remind them of practice and we introduce them to the Dharma, for example, to virtue and non-virtue and so on, and it will be very beneficial at that time because they're very, very receptive at that time. So now, for example, when we practice the Changjok, the purification ritual for the deceased, or when we do a sur smoke offering, at the end of these rituals, there's also a section where we speak the Dharma to these beings. And that is because a Bardo sentient being may very easily understand the meaning of the Dharma, especially if in their lifetime they have done at least a little bit of practice or study. Then it is very easy to introduce them, to remind them of that when they're in the Bardo. And so that is why we do these various aspiration prayers, and we We speak about the Dharma to them, about karma, about virtue and non-virtue, reminding them. So the benefit of doing that is really immense, because in the Bardo, the mind of a sentient being can very easily transform. So it's very transformable. And that is because they do not have a physical body. For example, when we are alive and have this physical body, it is just like a big tree trunk that you want to transport somewhere else. So no one can carry a huge tree trunk. It's just too heavy. But then if you submerge that tree trunk in water in a river, then you can pull it anywhere with great ease. So it is just like that in the Bardo, because the Bardo sentient being do not have a physical body of flesh, blood, and bones. It's very easy to direct them into the right direction when they come to this crossroad.
O temene ke lokso yimba raran la che mo khetsa wa kapsu sitang mandawa yode pare tege chama ke ngune sena namba inji menje namba sitang de tipo ke pin yin ke mo pin se je tende ma re ma do wa kare re sena chama che semkhor che dang yin de la che pin to bu che de dang yin de la ze sam chun be che de de chua kan de jik se na de ke pin to re nanchu se na de yin la pin sem de yin la ze sem de pin to bu tap se je de nanchu se ta ke mai namba ta ro ma ta ro dun de nang bu chu de re wa den de lokso kan da je go ni ta hye za wa de la pin be tap se ge yo ro wa den de je se na de je ta sho me la ta yang ro ta ta yin lokso ram da ka re se yo na de cham ma ge hyo de ba si ge yi le de ding ding de ka so de cho wa de wa ji de ta ba den de je ngaran su ji pa ko rom na yang ro to go yo re.
And so after someone has passed away, according to various customs, there are different things that people do according to their tradition. So, for example, it might be a Buddhist way of holding rituals for them, a Buddhist custom, or it might be a different religion or a different tradition, different lineage. So there's various ways of handling the funerary ceremonies according to various traditions. And so it is, all of them can be very beneficial. It's not that it's just Buddhist practices, that only Buddhist practices that will be of benefit and all the others will be useless. It's not like that at all. Because what actually really benefits them is a wish to help them, care for them, love for them. And if that is present, then really whatever ritual, whatever ceremony one practices, it is that mind that will benefit them. In fact, that is what we call the Buddha Dharma. It's this altruistic wish to help others. It is love for others. It is trying to find ways to help others. So whether we call it Buddhism or not, this is really what it actually is. So when one dies, according to various traditions, and people do different things to benefit the deceased. For example, in some customs, according to some customs, the body is cremated, or it is offered to the waters and so on. There's different traditions, but whatever they do, they surely do that in order to benefit the deceased. And that is what the Bardo consciousness will certainly feel. They will feel the love, that the care that other people feel for them. So actually, this is really, if you think about it, that's really something that actually stands to reason.
Tene da sepa Bardo ta manjo tene nyama mambon ro sa kapsu tene jewa nguma ka cha de ba yin lo pa masawan ro cha ne tene jewa jema ka wa le 룰레나 디가 전화도 협치한다고 그러죠. teni samsamla ngarang so ring twinba pena ne je la jian do ni do gu ba de sen jian do so tong yu do pa chu on tong gu yu pena la yu le jian do ni ge re na pin chu korang so de san tong tian ro ne ka wa je ma ge rig de so na pin chu tong to ba samsamla nyam dun zong sa se ne ya so de ji so wan do pena nam thang lan zong 남당은 잠자는 다 소견 잠재가 뭔가 힘은 정용 거를 다 대사도 라나 소스면 돈도와도 대한로서는 좀 사세는 양진도 같은 주님이 밤에 같은 용되게 요래.
And so then one wanders in the Bardo in the Bardo of Becoming for many days, and then so eventually, as time goes on, the imprints of the previous life become more and more unclear, and the appearance of the perception of one's future birth become increasingly clear, increasingly stronger. And as one approaches one's future birthplace, so sometimes it might also happen that one encounters other Bardo sentient beings who are of a similar kind, meaning that they will also take birth in a similar world, in a similar birthplace. So, for example, if one is to take birth in the God realm, then one might see another Bardo sentient being who is also going to take birth in the God realm. So you're seeing each other. That might happen. And sometimes it also is like many people kind of coming together. Like, for example, when you're at an airport, there's all kinds of many different people that come and go, but you don't actually know them. So just like that, one might come together with different kinds of beings who are just also going to take birth in a same kind of birthplace. But it's actually uncertain. It really depends on one's own mind. It's very uncertain what will actually appear.
teni ta je todang la nyerwa tang yeda gne to solo jian do ni yin je chonang lang gon tole tin de chonang do tang gon tole tin ro de chonang do je den den chang chang yong ge song yo wa teni lama yin bang tata karu mariko nyarwa tang tundo to so mariko tundo tang lama yin to so le jian do go yo na ting gon che le tin ro de ga na wan do ta mo tang teni la yo le jian do yo na go ya tin ta ta man ro na yin sen ro de chon nang dong sam sam tundo yong de ge is de ta ga na wa de ta me je wa ji ma ga na wa de shu che che len do na tundo yong ge yo re song yo re teni ta pe sam sam ni che ta che renye wa ka dra ta na che ta sonami ke cholo jo wa ka dra ta na ya na che jin sin ta ma ru la so ba den de ke che xie na nga rang zhu ne teni che gab go sa na do ke wo ta ya na za ke pong bo ke na lo ta za yi je ro na lo ta ta kan ta na den de che xie na ngan dra la ti ne nga rang ka xie ta gab go sa na ti jo be che to gab go sa tende se va le tene tene lu len do tende jo yong do ma shu de ta te ko wa ke ta ma lu do ga tende me song ne la so tende je le tene lu len do do ta ti kap so tene tende ka na wa kha wa kap so te ta nga rang ko wa na lu len do yo pa te ta ke yen ba ha ko tene je chot thap na te le tene yang je ge ge sem tata te che Bardo kan tuna ni ba ngo hwa tan de yong mo si ba ma ro tan de le tene lu ni ba le ma go wa ta ya thori lo ro ta ba tan de pin to yong do wa.
And so then as one approaches the place of one's future birth, it is said that if one is to take birth in the hell realms or as a hungry spirit, then one's perception will be that as one moves, as though one's body is upside down. So one's head is pointing down and one's feet are pointing up as one moves. So that is a sign of taking birth in hell or as a hungry spirit. Or if one is to take birth as a demigod or an animal, then one is said to move forward kind of sideways in a horizontal way. And if one is to take birth as a human being or as a god, then one's head is up, one's feet are down, just like now. So these perceptions may arise. And so then in any case, the perceptions of the future life become increasingly stronger. And then sometimes one might hear all kinds of terrorizing sounds, just like the crushing of mountains, or like terrifying thunders or floodings and wild animals, or war, like weapons and so on, various really frightening sounds that will cause so much terror and panic that all one will think about is escape, hiding somewhere, running away from it. And so then sometimes one will just hide anywhere, under a rock or inside like a heap, or like a little kind of a enclosure of grass. In this state of panic, one is literally willing to go anywhere in order to hide from this. And this is really how most beings take birth, in a negative existence in the 3 lower realms. This is how it happens. And so at that time, when one is in that state, if one is able to recognize in that moment, I'm about to take birth in a body in samsara, and if then a virtuous state of mind can arise, then it is not entirely impossible for one to recognize that these appearances are nothing but the confused appearances of the Bardo. And then one may not have to take birth in such a miserable state, and one may be able to take birth in the higher realms.
Yore China Nandendo, Mogebo Cope, Masanjo, Resha, Tene Con Na, Tene Nani, Nedelatin, Shesodua, Eduku Soa Hiedota, Nane, Tenusen, Minkandra, Tenena de Jabocapsutini, Hop the Calape, Yambonda or Chan. That did Shetsandua, Kwanga Shayo Hakomodo. Pe Yambo, Longa was anything, Casacala, Che Rondonin or Chan. Chingiba me bando tende cha tende che song teni pe kasa kando pe che gar chowa kando sen chanang pe nam shi do kya da pe drama ha cha chenpo da pe chapo de chowa hyo chenpo kasa kani yong teni kong khamba che gol lem ne masan da ro che gol lem ne ko tin na long khamba na yang ju de se du jang de ngula to lo na bo Papa Tolo Napo Kahe Jangan Gay and those. Then he caught Andran, Tolo Kama Jago son, Kama Jam. Then he take John and say by yes. They John there said that any corny cool from those. Tolo the John said the pani cool from those. Then he tell me say on the cool park, pool, Jawa Lang Sandua. Pakro Kahe Chala, the park bogus and the Pakistan and the Jawa Lang the doors. That thing when it done a Korampe, the guys here Yamar, the Pambo that the Kora Shamjo Yang, me understand the Niku, the Dimba Rendos and the Teresa Yala Dronger. Come on, Jabal, then could that park at your land in the war. 파게 제발란다 부갑서 되니 코기 다동 하고되노 되니 코베 생교다 근데 정성스 되니 티갑서 파쪽도 희선도와 그 제가 가셔야 된다서 전혀래 파쪽도 희선도 양내만한 예수 근남시된 참네 가사깔을 지켜난 남간도 망보종네 양 대다버게 감바지는 돌론다 만다 요사지는 렘네 양 그것만 자주대 쌈도와 그것만 자주대 쌈네라 코그 팅해마도 전도와 아이 해마가 그마자 파글을 랑송다 가르쳐나 좀 그만 맞아 산 대세도 당부 그만 자고서는 라과 요마도 파생도 그 돌로 토도 대대대는 그것만 맞아는 되세도 되네 코 장장네 장장네 왕호 쇼도와 개미 장소 개미 장네 되네 출제와랑도 코 물랑도 물랑도 라과 요마도 박속 차대요
Papa,
파그소 코페 뭐 다땡문에 그 로지리 답에 콜라더니 코게다 다동데 물랑 사도 지왕마 마다가 전되게도가 되니 박속 차고 그 점진데 콜트테스 되니 코페 센서 쳔보 건 된다서는 히 대이 돌파비알이 그 돈데 요래 고소마
Hakfusala. So then in the Bardo, all kinds of feelings may arise, all kinds of perceptions. So therefore, it's very, very important that one is able to remember virtue at that time. And there are stories about people who were able to remember their previous lives and their times in the Bardo. For example, there's one story about, so there was an old man. First, he was an old man and of a poor family. And so then this old man became very sick. And eventually he died from his disease in the hospital. So he was there in the hospital, and what he experienced was that all of a sudden he was lying there in the hospital bed, and all of a sudden it was like his body became completely light, and it kind of was hovering in the sky. Actually, he had already died at that time, but at that time he didn't know that yet. So he was light like the wind that could just go anywhere, completely uncertain. And in this moment of being so light, he felt extremely cold, like the weather has become just really cold. He was freezing. So he was going all over the place. And then eventually he came to a house. It seemed like to be like a family's home. So he came to the entrance of that house, and he entered the house. And on the wall of the inside of the house, he saw a black cloak, like a clothing hanging there. And because he was so cold, he just thought of stealing that cloak and wearing it. So he just took it. He stole the cloak from the wall, and he wore it. And then he fell asleep in that perception, that memory, which was actually, he died, right? So he put on the cloak, and then he fell asleep. And when he woke up, he already had taken birth as a little piglet. So a little pig. And so this is not just like a fairy tale or something, but actually is a true story, and it also has been analyzed in great depth. It's really a true story. So because he had stolen, he stole the cloak, he took birth as a pig. And when he was born as this little piglet, he still had some memory. So knowing what had happened, the little piglet was extremely sad. And then the little piglet died, and that went on like that for a few lifetimes. So again, the consciousness wanders in the Bardo, and again, the consciousness has a lot of fear and feels very cold. And again, it comes to this house and different kinds of cloaks in the house. Again, it steals the cloak to not freeze. So again and again, this thought of I have to take it, I have to steal it, so I don't freeze, arose in the mind. And so then one time in a different lifetime, so in a different Bardo, then eventually he recognized all of what had happened. And he said that he remembered to himself that it is because that's what I've been doing, because I've been stealing these cloaks from the walls, from those houses. That's why again and again I've taken birth in the body of a pig. So now I will not do that. No matter what happens to me, I will not steal. So he was actually already reaching for that cloak with his left hand to grab it, but then that thought arose, not again. So he did not steal the cloak. And because he was freezing, it was so cold, he then fell unconscious, he passed out. And when he woke up, he had taken birth as a human being. But this human being, actually, the left hand of that human being was actually kind of like the claw of a pig's hand. And that's a real story. There is a story where even one is taking birth in the human realm, they can still remember several of their previous lives. And then this human being was born with the pig's hand. So this is actually a real story that has been analyzed and also recorded in various reports.
Walatina drink to be over. Then the Delatina Koran Sola, now I shall the Tender Kangachimbo, some of I think the injury some do. Young Tata Drone Jingo, Tella. Da Hitsaduta, here you opportunity Hako, Marie, Lavian Sansan. Here you Bahama on it and be a young Majimbagan or Yametan Yajon, the Sonan, the Jonia, the Koran so Dongayang, we already love river. Dina Yinja Karajondos in a young Matanja Yorite, Choga Jimmy Puji Namuhamati Janar. They do Koran of Lombatini, Mataso Desa, the Sala, Pugudren, Sahudren, Pubando, Pandren, Kambando, Sawola, listen, Kosotana Degadova. Timatil and Charpa Huchin Botane, Tenipa Dapa, Mambo, Gonan San. The cocatin Dapatus of Ma Pute said, the Kamba Yimbajin and Tennessee, they do. Sai Pupa the Mate, Ko Sai Pupa not and Sakalem, the Shed Sessanova. In a coca opportunity for me. Sai Pupa the Mate zone, then it copy shocks and the Jane Party said, Co Tarsons on the wa. When is in the Hetan, the coca Tarsons, now he jumps on the wa. Now he can call Nala pass on the Nicoranga Jamila, call Teramben in Kachembon train, Saho Madem. There's a man says on call shocks and the Taya parties at the Sahonani, Sawon, Tonto. Mato Joseph and the Hessons and the cook at Yahindo. Could you make a tune Yas him with her? Could you make Yamas at the copy, Semba Georgia Tampen, Alan, call Shadows and there's a tie on the Tadon. Koran to Ganan Joseph and Mepasa. Then he passed on Bola Yantan or Jihido. What the Latin here the Boga Yasim. I call Harley, Perry, Koso. Now, so in country and that, and then so tarted on here to Koso Mataron Yamasi. There was on Joseph and Millie. Then the Nansan coat Yopal and Meba Gas and Co. Such a Yimbal Royal. Saja Yimban Rope, Tan Botic Sacha and Ronatin, Jomba Jaganan, Tan Kambajan and Robo, San Kambate, Gopa, Gote, and Yora. Cook Tepa, Segotan, ten Tintin, said in. They need to talk at Zen Goyo Pamator. They don't know won't go some Sarva. Then he cook go to show as a food, go Nala Cosin, Conala left till Sol, Jordan. Cook. Who is it? 보스는 맞지 찬다. 얘나 거기 참아 다동사 보스는 학고도 보스 제대로. 되네 제면 가게 진도 제면 가게 다 보고 제대로 로바스 이거로 봐. 로바스는 되네 다 대화 조제 저거로 봐. 마지막 다 저도 가wan도 저 제면도 저거 된다 생도서. 그건 통된도서 저도 봐 장무 되는 게제도서. 저들은 도저 쿠판 저거 띵사래. 오케이. 고소해. 단든 된다고 제리다 마도 뭐 보여 만사 말이잖아. 다 고치. 더 설 요걸 이제 된다서 제미 이마도 좋게. 얘나 마도 요기 뭐도. 된다지 송요래. 되니 뒤지라. 코테에서 코랑 그 대대다 삽 된도야라. 코랑 줄 lok선다 부만 하에 지대대. 차대 대서를 몰아 그거도 와. 다대 코랑 소리지 마체를 송을 그때 탐다고. lok선을 대서도. 되게 담게 그학 된다서 송시. 되니 코 다와 된 제제 다와 된 제제 차 다와 카케기 지라. 되니 코란도 힘바랜도와 드렉봉 야서 그 잘라 코다 부고 야서 된데 지나나 야는 마뉴 코란도 레간 로티스 니 드렉들 사망보 시망보로서는 드렉 사거도스 드렉 사건도 코게 사데 파트로서리 에이 저는 뭐 치아나 이제는 사데 파트로도 단디 보드는 단에 다 졌단 리모도 단 레도 제나 저는 코스 대선도와 되니 코천이 카다 보여 말해. 로 망보 카천이 다 보여 말해 대 보자. 담보 대시.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
나랑 대서 요리 됐다. 담보 대시나.
Yeah. Honestly. So there have been a lot of people who were able to remember their past life and the Bardo. And so the reason why they can remember is because their obscurations and the negative karma is not so thick, not so strong. And that's also, I think, this is also why they didn't experience so much torment in the Bardo. And then as a result of having lighter obscurations, they were then also able to remember those different lifetimes in the Bardo. So there is another story also about someone who has died. And so sometimes it happens that when somebody has died, that they don't recognize it at all. That's the other side. One doesn't understand at all that one has died. And so then one, for example, one thinks one is alive, and then one tries to interact with other people, like the family, but then they ignore one, and then the consciousness then feels rejected and feels very upset about being ignored. And so about this, there's one other story. It's a long time ago in China. There was a family, a husband, a wife, and a child, and so at that time, the people would live kind of in caves underground, and that was kind of made into their dwelling place, like a house. And so that's where the family stayed. And so one day there was a heavy rainfall and a lot of mud. There was a mudslide that then began to accumulate in front of the entrance of that cave, and they were completely locked in by the mud. And so then the family's father went to move the mud aside, so to open it up again. And while he did that, actually the mud fell onto him, and he was then kind of buried under the mud, and he died. But he didn't recognize that he had died. And so what he experienced was that, so he was trying to get rid of the mud, and the mud fell on him. And then he was so strong, he could, with all his force, lift it away and become free. So he actually thought that he had moved away the mud and he's still alive, when actually it was the consciousness being able to move, become free from the mud. So then, thinking that he was still alive, he went back home to his wife and he told her what happened today. He said, today something really dangerous happened. There was all this mud and I was buried on the ground, and with all my strength I was able to free myself and not die. So it's quite incredible that I'm still alive. It was so close to death today. And so when he said that to her, she completely ignored him. And that made him very upset. He felt really sad and he got angry, and he felt that it's unbelievable. I almost died today, and miraculously I was able to survive and free myself. And instead of being happy about that, she just ignores me. So then he went to tell his child, his son, the same story. I died and I almost died today, but I didn't die because I could free myself. It was really scary. And the son also just ignored him. And so then he was like, unbelievable. I can't believe that my own family doesn't care about me at all. Here I am, almost dying and escaping death and being able to free myself, and nobody seems to care. They surely have no love for me. So actually, it's better to have no family at all before I have a family like that. I'm going to go somewhere else. So then he went somewhere else, somewhere very far away. And so he came to this town, to a house, and he wanted to enter that house. So he tried to open the door by pulling the handle, but it wouldn't open. And so he was pulling and trying to open the door for a very long time. He had no time awareness at all. And so then suddenly the door just bursted open with full force, and he came inside the house. And actually, that is when he had already taken birth. This is when he was then born as a family's child, that family's child. And so then it was just like falling asleep and then waking up. But he still actually, even though he already had taken birth, he still could clearly remember and still know what is happening. And so there were a few women around helping with the birth, a few midwives. And so he was just coming out of the womb, but his umbilical cord was still connected to the mother's navel. So the midwives were looking for a knife to cut the umbilical cord. And so one of them was asking, where's the knife? And so then he knew where the knife was. I was on the wall. So he pointed with his finger toward the knife. And when he did that, it's his newborn baby, the women got really scared. And they said, oh, what's that? That's not a human being. So they actually suggested to abandon the child or give it to someone else. But the mother wouldn't let them. The mother insisted on keeping the child. And he could still clearly remember at that time. And so in their tradition, when a child is newly born, a little bit of blood is also kind of smeared onto the face. And that's supposed to kind of prevent any kind of obstacles from arising. So all of this, this person basically could remember all of these details of this birth. And so then he also remembered that a few months later, after he was born, maybe 7 or 8 months or so later, so this family were farmers, and while the family members would go out onto the field to work on the field, they had this kind of crib, this place where they would keep the baby. So they put the baby in there and they went to work in the fields. And so then there were many birds eating the grains from the field. And he was a little, like a few months year old baby, but like an adult, like a big person, he waved his hand to scare off the birds who were eating the grains. And again, the adults saw that and they were wondering, that can't be a normal human being. Is this a ghost or what? What's that? And so then, because he was still fully aware of what's happening, then he didn't dare to say anything else anymore. So then he spent many years not speaking up again. So the story continues.
Tani Koranke the Ango Yena Yana the Koranke grandfather in the chicken. Then Koranata Kejayabu Tree that country John Chiran country Chiran Hiego Marie Kol Kejayabu Lab Larry. Then he put the Ganga Chatan Lamdua. Or that tender sing out Tenderson Java Tenderson Langsong drinking though Telatin Tang Tata. Keja here your Mari, my hair, and Keja here your Mari, Cokeja here she got a book. Then it Chiran here go Mari. Then it get out such a mumble parts of town. Court dead uncle, Matan dead uncle, Pava yin, Chikanga Pugu Mai, Munesena. Then there's an Javandal Langsong region, Cokeja. They take parts of Matan Tama, Koranga Matan take such a Denian Hako Goyorite. Ina Matante Zaka Yichisi Madawa. Mawini Yora, Mata Puni, or Teni Yichisi Madawa. Tene Captic there into a Koran Soka, Sacha, Hinkaka Sacha Yorua, Hinkaka Sacha Trentoni, Mayin Zuba Tone. Then in Trentoni, Panda Yogura, Panda Yicha. Panda Yicha Yori, the Kawayo, she hear Mare. Then Koran so taps in. That takes in an answer power to me, Tenderson, such a yimbal Mazantic positive along the second. That take a hack window second. That takes in the telegaja Trijanas and the Korans of Tenderson, Trintusonly. The need that put the Lagaja Trinity around so the Sajak and saying you get the Sokawayo, the Gaja to do. Who would take a chasan drink it or Tana, such as na yayo and Tessie. Koto Yan on the Jing, the Koran of Yanka Sak, you get to Tana, you're Pugulapana. Then he chili, Jaja Yichine, then Koranso Nala Ya, get on Tana Ya de Gorilla River. Then he put the Android, Korante, Taron Tesa, Matsang Nimbatela Hinchalu. Yan on the desert, not there. Da Koranga Jemmy the law Yipja Chata Yore, Koranga Pu the law Nika Chata Yore, Korang law Jerry, what about law Jerry? The need to start up the Oji Yomare. The Nico Yang, Mamma San Yimbatala, Koran Jesak Masanta Mandro. That Matan Kanyaka Koran to Malatsaki Yore, then the second logic. I goes on.
And so then he was still a very young toddler. And so one day his grandfather spoke to him very nicely and asked him very gently, you can tell me anything, you don't need to be afraid. Tell me, who are you and where do you come from? And so then finally the child dared to say it all. And so then actually he was still so young that he normally wouldn't be able to speak, but he spoke and he shared the story of how he was able to remember his previous lives and how he had taken birth and his previous family and so forth. So he shared all of that with his grandfather. And so then he also said that there is this family and he's the father. He was the father of this family and then he had passed away and now I'm born as your child. and all of that. And so in the beginning, nobody would believe him. So it actually, he was actually to describe it very clearly, even saying that it was this family at that place and so on. But his mother and his family wouldn't believe in what he said. And so, anyways, at one point it happened that so the family were farmers, and they had this plot of land, this field. And there was a time where they ran into legal issues with the land. So they were running into legal problems. And in order to prove themselves, they needed a certain document that would be a proof of ownership of this particular piece of land. So they knew that this exists. They knew that this document exists, but they didn't know where it is. So they were looking and they couldn't find it. And so, then actually, since they remembered what the child had said about his previous lives and how he could remember how he has taken birth and so on, they thought of maybe if we ask him, he would know. So even though they didn't really believe before, they then asked the child about it, and he knew exactly all about this document because it's from his old family. And so he remembered exactly where it was and where in the house it was put, where it was. And so then the family went there, and it was exactly at the location that the child had described. And so that is when they really then cultivated 100% trust in what he had said. And so then that family invited him to stay. And that was his old family of his previous life. And so because he still had some imprint from the previous life, he was the father of this family in a previous life, and he had left behind his wife and his son. So he was still a little bit attached to them. So he decided to stay a little bit. But then at that time, his wife had already turned 40, and his child already had turned 20. And the father, who was reborn as his child, was only 8 years old at that time. So that was not very convenient for him to stay in that kind of configuration. So even though that was his birth family, he then left to stay with his new family. But actually, in his life, he continued to consider really both families as his family.
Oh yeah, dan kowa gane dan la tendendo, Bardo gane dan tendendo ndo. Dan dordina geva ka pakcha de shokche zam sen la kom de yona na, Bardo ne kam ne de gadu na zhen go do. La ba du gang an che ba su zhen go do. De zhen na ni ti gang la de kyo shen do do. Wo da de ga jen bu ri sha na su da da ni de shokche zam sen la kom ta ta. Da nyam le sen na de ba.
So this is how it is in samsara. This is how it is in the Bardo. And so in brief, if you're able to now habituate ourselves to this habit of virtue, then we will also be able to remember it in the Bardo, especially when we encounter difficulties. And if you're able to remember it at that time, then the difficulty will be pacified. And that is why it is so important that right now we really try to habituate ourselves to the practice as much as we can. And this is really why we engage in practice.
To talk at the what you say, Zodondo, then the don't die here to Tsuya, the not also. Da Jivaki Nijixena.
So time is almost coming to an end. So we have passed this time by telling some stories, but we have time for a couple more questions.
Anyone?
I think there was one in the chat.
Yeah.
The chat, In Poa practice, we have taught by Garchen Rinpoche and yourself that the bindu is red. Now, in this teaching, it is white. So which color we should choose to practice now? Does it matter in terms of color change?
빈도 다 제바 여제 말이 다다가 좀 포와 주바 만다와 돼서 그 빈도 칼로야 돼서 만다와 송도 요래 대 카도 점로시라 개체모 연주 말이 상도
So I think that it probably doesn't make a big difference, and maybe the difference in color probably has to do with the different Pova lineages. But color in itself, I believe, really is probably not what's most important.
Ina, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, my question is, I've heard and I've received teachings that the 3 days after you die, that the karma becomes neutral. I mean, that does not affect you. Is that true?
Ti kosong teni tambongan so shit satu. Sorry, you mean within the 3 days or after the 3 days?
Within the 3 first days after you die.
Ko tinda chikosong ti shit satu nima som giringla teni le se ti tisam tangnyom dawo tisam kanla ur meba dawo chando go yore nima som ti giringla ti nguna reve.
알레 메바 차시나 니마 섬데 칼라 완보 효성한다 오세는 내가 레스는야 제단 되는지 나서 카페라 희호라 향섬 치요한다 좀 되니 향섬 그지니 고사포 차네 되는 리용 그리 세가 요리데 덴타지 등이 봐 요사 말에 가시에 다다 희마 다데 진대와 바돈 향섬도 뭐 된지 같이 데 마데데 니바 요사 말에
Cái giáo lý này lại chị nói là cái giọt tinh chất màu trắng như vậy.
Ina ti kapla le meba chara.
내 메바 차스는 내 메바 차스 요 말에 다티 값스 람상 때 개와 링가 요 말에 때를 때네 내 메바 차완다고 센테스 내가 요라
So in those now generally we say that there are those 3 days that we spend in this kind of unconscious state after death, and it is almost, it seems like there is no karma, but it's not really. And also, even though it is said that generally that after, like, there's 3 days after one is died, one is 3 days in this like state, actually it's not so sure. Some actually immediately, the moment they die, they already recognize that. And so it is actually very uncertain in terms of timing when we come out of this unconscious state. It's not necessarily 3 days, but for however long the duration is, karma does not really kind of neutralize or kind of become non-existent at that time. It just seems as though it's that way because one is kind of in an unconscious state.
다다 가서 지당 바도 그 두연들 샤마 입지 셰건다 올라고 요르데 다단 타제 등이 바 자완이니 다때 망휴了등으로 카셰는 타제 등이 바배 연연보 바도는 참네 카셰가 셰요 방어 모토로 잡타스는 되죠 바 요르와 다다 가서 그 동전도 요르 동전 존지 람도 동전 통송와다 통송와다 사자가 히카실로 동전 요리 존지도 바도 그 생지리 왕문에서나
So even though we say that one spends 49 days in the Bardo, it's really not so sure. Maybe the majority of beings, it might be true for the majority of beings, but there are some who spend a really long time in the Bardo. There are some who do not recognize that they have died for hundreds of years. For example, we speak about spirits, ghosts. So people say, I saw a ghost, I met a ghost, and so on. And there are certain places that are haunted by ghosts. Actually, what these ghosts are really are is Bardo sentient beings.
Thank you, Lamala. Thank you, Ina.
Okay, that then I yank it to Jasari. What?
So another question: how do we do power for an animal, and what is this? No, two questions. One is, how do we do power for an animal? Dundo chila power kanda the what is?
Roland Poan the Tanta, Mayim Balan Poan the Tanki Bari, Tangaran to the Pinsem, Jachimbo, Goni, Mekbateko, Tundoyana, Tundo Mayim Baina, Yimba, Koran Zupote, or Tache Gala Sindonetini, it's our Gomdonetinia, Sanje Opame, Tayana Genese, La Korana Hitia, Opame Sal, Dringayo Samba Senata. Nam Jung around so Mayim Ban Poja, but I was in my partner to see Joey to roll.
So actually, the way you practice power for an animal is the same as for a person, and the greatest benefit comes from a wish to an altruistic intention. So you have a vast altruistic intention to benefit them, and then you visualize, whether it's an animal or a human being, you visualize in the same way. You see their body, and within there, you visualize the central channel, and then you visualize how the consciousness is being pulled up to the Buddha Amitabha or to Chenrezig. So we can do it in the same way as we do it for human beings. We can do it the same way for animals.
Oh, yeah.
And then what is Taron TikTok tela? What is this poa called?
Poor Tata La Patria. Poor Sajid.
De la Mingyore. Bena poa Kashila Mera Chakto Mada or the poa Ming.
Himbo Jinjing Poa La Ura. Himbo send the Hesson La Guire. Hesson Jison Zimbo Poa.
This poa is called, so in Tibetan it's Shimpo Chinjin, which means to kind of care for, look after the deceased poa. So how can we make contributions to Lamala for his teachings? I'm in Singapore. Moranda Singapore yoris teni de la di kachina la ni shende yakona teni shende khande kyagori.
Kachuna la Hinda Jago Mare. The Charang Sam la the Tendaka Kulong Yona teni take. Drink the Yore can tell a message in the Jago Mare.
There is no need to make any donations for the teachings. It's fine if it's enough, if you just have this kind of motivation in your mind, but it's really not necessary to make a donation.
Rab dripping chupa dollar. So Yamne Apo Sena, the rab dripping chupa Sidua.
It is said that the best offering is the offering of practice. So if you practice well, that's really the greatest offering.
Oh, yeah, that's some yai. That's a Madua.
So if there's no more questions, then shall we stop here?
That then Bardo to tree Tamatari, you drop some of it. Not to give it our. The Latin doesn't time, she don't have Junre Nitan Trani. The need type work compound of the Cheta. The need Tatanji Tindi Ganlayata, Che Ganga, Nega Ganga, Mandroga Ganga, Muiga Ganga, Te La Sobakatan, Juma Yaga Ganga Mambu. 강아 찌찌 기기 망보 요래 되게 탐지다 희워게 제대인 삼바세네 뇌바 데이터와 되는 데는 뭐하다 뭐하신 거래.
So this completes the instructions on the 6 Bardos with the last Bardo today. And at the end, we shall dedicate our roots of virtue for all sentient beings, wishing that all sentient beings may become separated from the cause and the result of suffering, and that they may attain the state of liberation. And also, we shall pray that all these difficulties in this world become dispelled. There's all this suffering in the world. There is the suffering of this disease and the suffering of war and a suffering of starvation, of famine. There's the suffering caused by the 4 elements. There is suffering piled upon suffering. So we should all think that we are having engaged in this root of virtue in order to pacify all of this suffering. So let's dedicate with this motivation.
Sambo Jigen the Sadala, Gune Gunjan, Sambo Yamba Bave Jadaran Jimbatan, Gunda Sambo Tayan Degin, the Gunja Jisa Dalobje, Giwan the Dadam Jerabdong, Sanja Kosan, Yibesalab, Junim, Judim Besalab. Gundam Zindum Besalab, Jadang Yamulan Robajo, Gunjo Sundimbata, Sanje Dong Sonjo Sambatan, Jeje Sinje Latam, Sonye Yongso Zopan, Adan Chimbotan, Chuje, Rayan, Nambaradajan, Samje Machape, Topji de Yindan Roba Georgia, Datan Konde Tam, Jeje, Tusum de Sopotan, Yubeke, Zavandi. Dadan Sinjin Tamje, Nudu Lana Meba, Yandaba, Sobe Sanjo Rambo, Jedoba Georgia, Tempe Bajo Lame Shabete, Tinzen Jiva Saden Yong Loja, Timbe Jindang Atan Jova, Timba Yong Rene Petra, Janjo Semjo Rambo, Maje Panan Jijoy, Jiba Nyamba Mibar Yang Kone Kondam Pewa Yo. Thank you everybody.
Mala. Thank you, Ina.
Thank you, Lamala.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Ina.
Ina.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
We finished 6 Bardos teaching.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.